This video is brought to you by Too Long. That's the official TLDR newspaper we've made and which is available to order right now. On Wednesday, the Netherlands held an election in which only one thing was guaranteed. The country would be getting a new Prime Minister, as Mark Rutte, whose government collapsed over migration in July, announced he would not seek re-election after 13 years in power. This created a door of opportunity for parties new and old, and ultimately saw an unprecedented result for the hard-right populist PVV. In this video, we're going to explain the shock results, what just happened, and why government formation looks as complex as ever. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. Let's get straight into the results. Surging into first place is the right-wing Populist Party for Freedom, or PVV, led by Geert Wilders, a long-time player in Dutch politics known for his anti-Islam and anti-immigration views. His manifesto called for a ban on mosques and Qurans, a referendum on leaving the EU, and a whole load of other things. His party ended up on a massive 37 seats, up from the 17 they won at the last election in 2021. In second place with 25 seats is the new centre-left Green Labour alliance, led by Frans Timmermans, former foreign minister and the European Commission's ex-climate chief, known for his work on the European Green Deal. With his name recognition, he was considered the best candidate to lead the new alliance, which aimed to revive the long-struggling Dutch left. He campaigned primarily on the issue of climate change, housing affordability, and minority rights. Close behind them with 24 seats, 10 seats lower than in 2021, is the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy, or VVD, which is the party formerly led by Mark Rutte, which until this year had won every election in the country since 2010. Rutte was succeeded as party leader this year by his Justice Minister Dilan Yeşilgöz, who led the VVD into this election, hoping to become the country's first female Prime Minister. She's from a Turkish-Kurdish background and arrived as a child refugee, but is considered further to the right than her predecessor and takes a harder line on migration. Despite framing her campaign as time for a fresh start, it's clear that voters wanted actual change after 13 years. In fourth place with 20 seats is New Social Contract, a brand new party led by popular former Christian Democrat politician Pieter Omtzigt, who came to prominence in part for his role in exposing the childcare benefit scandal which brought down Mark Rutte's previous government in 2021. Omtzigt campaigned on transparency, government reform and democratic overhaul, but also favours limiting immigration. These can be considered the four major parties, as they have 20 or more seats. As for the smaller parties, there are a lot. You've got the centrist Democrats' 66 party, which fell from 24 to 9 seats. Below them is the Farmer Citizen Movement, or BBB, which in March soared to win the provincial and Senate elections off the back of the Dutch farmers' protest, but collapsed in the polls since then and ended up winning only 7 seats in the general election. Then you've got 9 other parties, including the Christian Democratic Appeal, or CDA, on 5 seats or fewer. Wilders' victory is significant, having risen from 5th in the polls just 6 months ago. His party has seen massive ups and downs over the years, but has never come first. His hostility to immigration, anti-Islam and pro-Israel rhetoric are not new, but clearly landed particularly strongly in this election cycle, given the conflict in Gaza and recent attack in neighbouring Belgium. Wilders is also a strong debater, and topped the public polls as the most persuasive leader in one of the final debates. He also somewhat moderated his tone during the campaign, for example by suggesting that he was willing to make concessions on his anti-Islam policies, adding that there are more important priorities. He also likely benefited from the fact that the VVD's new leader opened the door to having him in government, thus legitimising his party in a way that Mark Rutte hadn't. After its creation in August, Pieter Omtzigt's New Social Contract had polled first, but declined as the new election drew nearer for a number of reasons, including that he flip-flopped on whether he actually wanted to be Prime Minister. As for the Green-Labour alliance, they achieved the best results for a centre-left party in more than a decade, benefiting from having joined forces and also becoming the left-of-centre strategic vote. However, Timmermans was disadvantaged by his image as a Brussels technocrat, making him unpopular among right-of-centre voters, particularly for the green agenda he pursued while at the European Commission. So the key question now is, what will the next Dutch government look like? Well, the parliamentary arithmetic looks pretty difficult, mainly because Wilders' PVV has long been very contentious, and ahead of the election the other major parties had expressed their reluctance to, or ruled out, entering government with him. But having come first by a significant margin, it's hard to see how a coalition could form without the PVV, and as Wilders himself said, his party had become too big to ignore. Perhaps the most plausible outcome is a right-wing coalition led by the PVV, including the VVD and New Social Contract, which together would have 81 seats, 5 more than the 76 required for a majority in the 150-seat lower chamber. Unlike her predecessor, Mark Rutte, VVD leader Dylan Yeşilgöz had said that she'd be willing to enter coalition talks with the PVV, but would not go into government with Geert Wilders as Prime Minister. But after the exit poll, she didn't explicitly rule this out, choosing only to say that this was now Wilders' job to try and find a majority, and that she thought it unlikely that he'd be able to, adding that her party would have to weigh things carefully. New Social Contract leader Pieter Omtzigt, however, had vaguely ruled out governing with Wilders' PVV by saying his policies were unconstitutional. But after the exit poll came out, Wilders clearly tried to address this by acknowledging that we should not take any measures that would be unconstitutional. Also, after the exit poll, Omtzigt seemingly changed tune to leave the door open by governing with the PVV, by saying the Netherlands needs to be governed and we are available, also echoing Wilders' earlier remarks by saying any government formation won't be easy, and that it requires many politicians to step over their shadows. It's possible that this potential coalition could also be joined by the BBB, not because its 7 lower house seats are that important, but because it's the largest party in the Dutch Senate. All laws must pass through it, so having a sizable presence in the Senate is important to a government's viability. And with New Social Contract having 0 Senate seats, because it was formed months after the Senate election earlier this year, and the PVV only having 4, then having BBB on side would be very useful. The party's leader said Geert Wilders cannot ignore us, adding that she's 100% confident that we will get into government. If attempts to form a right-wing coalition fail, then there is an outside possibility of a broad coalition, excluding the PVV. If you combine the seats of the Green-Labour alliance, the VVD, New Social Contract and D66, then you get 78 seats, enough for a majority. But there's all sorts of reasons why negotiations to form this government would be very tricky, not least because the Green-Labour alliance and the VVD have very different platforms and made those differences a key part of both of their campaigns. So what happens now? Well, the newly elected lawmakers will meet on Friday and appoint an informateur, usually a respected veteran politician who will then work behind the scenes, discussing with each party to explore the various options for a new government. Eventually, proper negotiations on the most plausible coalition can start, beginning what's expected to be a long process. In the meantime, Mark Rutte will remain caretaker Prime Minister and will have to hold off his retirement plans until a new government forms. If you want more from TLDR and want to support our journalism, consider picking up a copy of our newspaper, Too Long. This is a one-off physical newspaper we've been working on over the last few months, which includes 32 pages of analysis and explainers from the TLDR team on everything from Ukraine and Gaza to the state of the French and German governments, or the upcoming elections in the UK, US and around the world. It's not just us either. We have a full interview with creator and journalist Johnny Harris that people who buy the newspaper can also watch via a special QR code. Plus, there's articles from a ton of other creators, including JJ McCullough, Search Party, Sophia Smith-Gaylor, and many more. This really has been a very exciting project for us to work on, and hopefully you can already see all the work we've put into it, even the TLDR themed crossword. So if you want to pick up a copy and help fund our journalism on YouTube as we head into 2024, then the link to the store is in the description. Plus, you can get 20% off your purchase this week only by using code TLDREU at checkout. And with a limited quantity available, if you do want one, I'd order soon, especially if you want it before Christmas. As always, thanks so much for your support, and I hope you like this silly but genuinely very good project as much as we do. Thank you.